Hi, I'll just wait for Elise to connect. I'm really excited for today's program, which is part of the Canada Culture Week, which we are organizing with our music department. And we'll have Elise pretty soon. Also in collaboration with the Consulate General of Canada. So thank you for joining us. We'll just wait for Elise to sign in. Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, good.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you great. So, oh,
Okay.
hang on. Set this up a bit better. Like,
So as I was saying, I'm
genuine.
really excited to be in conversation with Elise Rasmussen as part of our Canada Culture Week. As I am getting ready to show everyone your beautiful work, can you let us know where are you? How are you?
Sure. I'm in Los Angeles. I've recently, well, I came here in January and then the pandemic hit and I was kind of debating being bi-coastal, but I guess now I live in LA for the foreseeable future. And yeah, just surviving, feeling optimistic with the election. So maybe some positivity will enter into our lives soon. But yeah, just oh, sorry, my phone keeps tipping over here. Yeah, just feeling, optimistic and feeling good about
Yes,
hopefully the future.
sure. Um, so why don't you talk about this work? Um, Let us know. This was part also of a residency.
Yeah, so the newest project that I worked on, it's just kind of been completed. It's called The Year Without a Summer. It began out of research I started doing in like around 2018, and then most of the production was done in 2019, and the post-production was done earlier this year. The work is currently, it was on view at Latitude 53 in Edmonton, which is the city I grew up in, as well as the Art Gallery of Alberta there as part of their biennial, which is ongoing. So if anybody's in Edmonton who's tuning in, please go. And then I'm actually going to be screening the video at JOAN or through JOAN online, JOAN, which is based out of Los Angeles here, next Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific time or 9 Eastern time. And I'll be in conversation with Wendy Vogel. So this project is really, it's about circumstances related to the year 1816, the year without a summer, and Mary Shelley writing her seminal novel Frankenstein that year, and how that was influenced by weather conditions during her kind of summer sojourn in on Lake Geneva. Um, and so I was interested in like exploring kind of that creative process of hers, but also thinking about climate change contemporarily. And what I had learned through my research was that it was because this volcano, Mount Tambora in Indonesia, had erupted the year prior that caused extreme weather conditions to hit Europe and parts of North America. It created about a 2-year famine due to crop shortages, and it's been known as the year without a summer. Um, and I was also interested in like how this also shifted art production, both Mary Shelley writing her book at this time and also Turner, his skies shifted in terms of color and because he was like sketching what was going on environmentally. Friedrich as well, and really thinking about climate change now. And also, I mean, we all just experienced, or most of us, I imagine, experienced a year without a summer being in
Yeah,
lockdown with COVID. So I feel like it's a rather timely project.
totally. Um, and this is some of the views of the exhibition.
Yeah. Yeah. So I work a lot in photography. I was trained as a like with photography. So a lot of the work that I make is photo based. Usually I'll have photographs. some sort of installation component, and then also usually I'll make like more recently I'll like usually incorporate a film component as well, which is kind of almost like the thesis of the project, or that's kind of where you get most of the information from. And then this piece also, or this project also incorporated a series of cyanotypes, which I'm sure we'll kind of come across. But this is like an installation view at the Art Gallery of Alberta right now. So this is from another project, Did You Know Blue Had No Name, which was done at that I had in a show at Night Gallery called Blue State. And this was the first time I was working with the medium of cyanotypes.
We can go back to that later.
Sure.
If you want. Or if you want me, I could show some of the videos.
Yeah, maybe that would be kind of useful for people to kind of get a taste.
How can I do this again? Okay. So, I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear.
2 centuries ago, 1815, on Sumbawa, a small island in the Java Sea, Mount Tambora erupted. The largest eruption in recorded history. The effects of its explosion reverberated around the globe. The Sumbawans believed that Tambora's eruption was retribution for the colonization of their land by the white man, and perhaps this retribution was twofold. For the following year, and for the 2 thereafter, violence and famine plagued Europe, and many suffered a slow death due to poor harvests caused by unimaginable weather. The following summer, 1816, on the shores of Lake Geneva, a group of young literati, an experimentally minded circle, gathered in a home, Diodati. Through boredom brought on by the terrible weather, they were sequestered indoors instead of living out their romanticized aspirations for a summer abroad, away from English society. The circle read ghost stories and hatch a plan to create their own, a contest, to see which of these talented men would write the most bone-chilling thriller of all. Undermining the woman in their cadre, Mary would write the story that would surpass and change literary history. Frankenstein.
And this is you, right?
That's me, yeah.
Riding on the back of dirt bikes to Rick's guest house.
Do you want to show the whole video?
I think we could probably stop there.
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to watch the whole thing at JOAN next week. So, yeah, that kind of gives a little bit of a taste of the piece. It's really kind of incorporating these 3 stories: the story of Mary Shelley being on Lake Geneva and her circle, and also like her circumstances of being like a woman in this circle of other literary minded men, and how she's, I mean, they do respect her, but they also don't quite like let her have as much of a voice. And so I'm quite interested in kind of revisiting that. And I mean, she kind of shows them all with writing Frankenstein. But then, yeah, she was like 18 years old. It just, I mean, it's kind of incredible to think about that. And she, you know, she changed literature forever. So, so she's, I mean, I think she's just such an, I mean, the book is wonderful. It was like nice to revisit, rereading the book. Like I had read it in my first year of university when I was her age, and to think like, I think there was something about like reading it at the same, you know, age of her writing it, and then to now read it again, and just to, you know, the story completely holds up. I think it's like more relevant today than ever in a sense. And yeah, it's really incredible. And then, so I was marrying together like that story along with so I traveled to Lake Geneva and spent 3 months on a residency at Becque in Switzerland, which is the same amount of time that Mary Shelley had spent. And then I prior to the residency, I had traveled to Indonesia and went to the island of Sumbawa, where Mount Tambora is, and it was like about a 2-day hike up to the top of Tambora, and then we hiked down the following day. and shot footage and photographs from there. And during this whole experience, I ended up incurring a stress fracture of my hip due to the,
Oh no.
I think probably hiking and with heavy equipment and everything. And so I
So
ended
that
up having crutches in
yeah.
the shoot, which kind of mimics Friedrich's Wanderer with his walking stick. And also, I just felt like it worked really well with the quote, which is about if you don't have a permanent injury, it'll be a pleasure to look back, or sorry, it'll be an adventure to look back upon with pleasure, which is a letter that her sister writes to Mary Shelley when she goes to travel to Switzerland. So,
Wow. Um, yeah, so this is the installation in the gallery, and let me see if I can show more of the work.
yeah, so I have like a lot of reoccurring kind of motifs of, that wanderer image, which I think is like, this iconic image and is like overused and overplayed, even though I still like it. Um, but then, yeah, there's me posing as it. There's like these books on romanticism that make its appearance in the film as well. It's like this quintessential image of like the romantic art. And then also it's used as a cover for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So really thinking about also this like the problematics of this idea of like the lone, and I will say man, because usually that's kind of like the idea within romantic art of like the lone man in the wilds of the environment. And then there's like a whole issue about like landscape and art and landscape just in general of being this thing that men must reckon with and try to tame or conquer. And I'm interested in those kinds of ideas. So
And the representation of the landscape also, and who is it for, and
yeah,
this type of like, I guess, postcard or type of souvenir effect that we have
yeah,
on, the landscape.
yeah, absolutely. And
So,
yeah, even this, I mean, the selfie, needing to take an image of oneself in the landscape now as
right.
well. So to kind of prove you're there. So
Yeah. So this, okay, so this one is the work that,
yeah,
yeah.
so the cyanotype, the image before that,
Mhm.
that's a piece that I made that was to try to mimic that mountainscape, which is like the mountainscape that I looked at repeatedly, especially when I was a bit incapacitated on the lake. And so I'm really interested in this like layering effect and kind of visibility and invisibility effects of making of photographs, basically, or photographic making. So I I ended up making, I think it's a series of 7 panels, and each one's supposed to be representing one mountain that layered one on top of the other, kind of creates the mountainscape as, I'd seen it. And as you kind of enter into the gallery, like I encourage people to like not just like look at it, but to be able to walk through it. And it kind of, I'm interested in the creating of some sort of environment as well. When you're doing an exhibition, to kind of create a
Yeah.
space. So,
And can you talk a little bit more about the idea of like this transparency and what's the purpose of it in your work, or opacity?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been quite interested in like layering techniques, I guess, with photographs of how one image can be layered upon another, which is like, I guess it's geological in a way of sediments in time, but also thinking about um, the ways that like history is also, kind of something happens and another thing kind of happens on top, and it's being influenced over one and another, and all my work is kind of alluding to revisiting a historical moment. um the uh yeah, this idea of kind of this opacity or being able to see through one image to another, I think is something that I'm interested in playing with. I don't know if it's fully fleshed out, but I'm still kind of, it's something that I keep kind of returning to and wanting to investigate further, as opposed to just being this like 2D image that doesn't go anywhere. Like, how do we penetrate or move into the surface? So
Yeah. And this work also has to do with with the color or not color.
The color blue and the mountains as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of my work. I mean, I grew up near the Rocky Mountains, so I have a feeling it's been now like influencing my work in a way. But this is a previous project called "Did You Know Blue Had No Name," and it was shown at Night Gallery in 2018. And this project was about looking at the history of the color blue, which happens to be my favorite color, many people's.
Mine too.
It's a great color, right?
Yeah.
So, and it has like different, different tonalities and can have different, whether it's warm or cool. But I was interested in this idea of, well, the title comes from this concept of that the color blue didn't have a name until it could be extracted from the earth in order to make pigment. And then all of a sudden it was given a name. And I was interested in this idea of naming and like kind of the colonizing effect that naming has. And does something even exist if, we haven't like written it down or given it some sort of a name. And then the piece also looks at these cyanometers, which are like the round discs that are attributed to Saussure, which there they are, which was a device that was used to measure the blueness of the sky. Saussure had created a contest to see who could climb to the top of Mont Blanc, because he was an amateur alpinist and he was interested in bringing his field work up to the top of the mountain, but he didn't quite have the skills or didn't know how to quite get there himself to kind of deal with that terrain. And so he created this contest. And two men went up there. They figured out how to get to the top. And so it was really kind of Saussure's quest to test out his theories of blue and other scientific theories that led to this, kind of amazing feat. And so I was interested in kind of just like sometimes like these ways of like what are driving forces in this case, exploration, but also how like who has the privilege to be able to explore their lofty ideas in a sense as well. So, so the piece kind of, again, like has the photographs as a cyanotypes and then also a film. And the film really, the film is dealing mainly kind of with these histories and grappling with also like who are the voices that have been overlooked in history. So, yeah.
I'm going to show a little bit of the
Sure.
film. For just a few minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Creating a synthetic version, changing the technology of the art of painting. And in the 1960s, Yves Klein went further, painting once again the female body by painting the flesh itself. To ride on the canvas, the female body, another tool, a tool for man. Her body, her label, his gaze, achieving greatness off the backs of women. This blue, named after him.
Yeah, so the piece also, kind of goes into, again, these like stories of, how men, with the Yves Klein, kind of interrogating, the fact that it's women that he's using to make these works, but then it's always attributed to him. And so really it's like, it's thinking through these ideas of like who can claim space as well, how certain bodies are used and how other ones kind of are certain bodies are used, but then for other people and for their kind of, accolades and whatnot. So that piece kind of explores that, like, that touches on also like overlooked feminist histories, indigenous histories, and to think about, well, who is the blue then? Because if blue doesn't have a name until it can be extracted and used for men, well, maybe there's a lot of blues around us. So that's kind of why there's kind of this allusion to, and throughout the piece, there's a lot of like the voiceover kind of says the you a lot. And so it's kind of also bringing the audience in or, to try to make one think about like themselves and their subject position and whether that fits or not
Yeah. And let me see if I showed the other works. Um, but we can also talk about other histories and overlooked histories with this one that I love so much.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a performance that I have given, would love to rejig and give again. But it's a project called She Doesn't Get the Rules. And it's the first time that I actually used, like that I wrote a script. And so I think that it's kind of like a smaller piece that I did, but it ended up becoming, I think, something that's really informed the works, the last two works that I talked about. And so I was on a residency. Again, a lot of my art has been influenced by residencies that I've been on. I was on a residency at the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Dublin. And while I was there, there was an exhibition from surrealism to now and thinking through like the concepts of love. And there was an event and they asked, me if I would like to make a performance piece for the event, thinking through notions of surrealism. And I was like, okay, great. And while I was researching more into the surrealists, I got really angry at what a bunch of misogynists they are or were. And
Surprise.
yeah, and but that we hold them to being this like super avant-garde, like, oh, how radical. It's like, oh, well, yeah, but are they that radical when they keep putting women, in this position that's over time and time again? So I wanted to channel this in a way, and so the piece becomes a PowerPoint presentation, and there's like around like 300, 400 slides, and each one, again, this layering technique that kind of happens. And I begin by kind of like seducing the audience in like, oh, I'm just going to like talk about surrealism and let's get into kind of this funky state of mind. And then it's a bit of a like
Boom.
punch, punch, punch. Yeah, exactly. Of just like, let's think through these ways. And also just, I mean, even, I'm talking about the surrealists being misogynist, but I mean, within the art world still, this like exists and continues to go on. And I mean, this was made before the Me Too movement, which I think has like hopefully propelled some things forward and like kind of highlighted real issues within, within the art world, within, any sort of field. And but yeah, so it's given as a performative lecture, and so that's why also the medium of doing the PowerPoint. And then I've also done other versions of it where I've done an intervention with like this like art history textbook as well, where there's no mention of any female artists ever in the history of modern art. And I mean, thinking through there's a lot of surrealist female artists who were part of that circle who were also like serving as like the muse, which is something that I interrogate as well. And so, yeah, so the piece is kind of looking at that history and thinking about also how is it that different now, and how do we kind of push against this or overcome that. So
and also, I mean, this is something that we can all relate to. It happens in academia, philosophy, architecture, like all of these other fields that are like, obviously male dominated, but it's a really amazing piece. And do you change the narrative according to the people that are on the space, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've performed it 3 times. So the first time I did it at IMA in Ireland, in Dublin, and then from there I ended up expanding the piece a little bit. I did it for a performance at Gallery 44 in Toronto. That's where this image is taken from, and I'd expanded it from like being 6 minutes to about 13 minutes, and incorporated this other intervention with the textbook. I mean, I think the IMA audience was actually like a little broader. I think the Gallery 44 audience, I've also done it at AIR in Brooklyn as well. So I feel like those have been a bit more art-going audiences in some capacity. But the piece as it had like last existed was like leading up to the 2016 election. And so there was like a lot of kind of interrogating that, and then what like kind of the fallout of like basically Trump and the misogyny that was going on with Hillary Clinton. So there's like aspects politically that I wouldn't have maybe shown in Dublin, just given being in the US versus there. Yeah. but I think as a form of this performative lecture, it's a style that I'm quite interested in keeping working with and exploring further. And again, that kind of layering aspect of like these, you know, in this case, it's archival images I found online, but it's similar to how I've used like archival imagery that I found in actual archives or through other books and other material that I'll incorporate in the photos and films that I make. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. You call it performance lecture, but I think it's also like pedagogical in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I mean, it's really interesting to see how it evolves also.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and let me see if we can show another piece. This one is very interesting.
Yeah, this is a still from a video and another performance which became a video called Variations, which is a piece that I did. It's a one of two parts. Like, kind of did two projects based on the work and biography of Ana Mendieta. So this piece is, I did a performance at Pioneer Works where the work was later shown, where I explored the circumstances of the night of Ana Mendieta's death on September 8th, 1985. And so the piece uses as kind of a framework three differing statements that Carl Andre had made at different points. One which was a statement he made in the New Yorker in 2011, where he basically says what happened was that they were asleep in bed and Anna got up to close the window because the weather was like cold or something, and then she slipped and fell. And then the other two statements that he said were closer to the time, one which was from the 911 call, where he says that they had a quarrel about the fact, you know, that he's more successful. She went into the bedroom, or that he's more successful, excuse me. She went into the bedroom, he went after her, and she goes out the window. And then the other statement was made to the police officers the following morning, where he said they had again a fight about the fact that, oh, he's such a successful artist and she just wasn't, and so he feels responsible. But he says that she went to the bedroom and went out the window, and so he starts to kind of separate himself from like the actual scene of the crime. And so I used these three kind of frameworks to do an improvisation where I cast two actors, both the approximate like height, weight, and age of Anna and Carl. And her height is really important because she was so tiny. And then I had like the set built to scale where there's the windowsill, and like it's not like she could have just like tripped and fallen. Like she would have had to like physically been lifted up or lifted herself up like on a chair or something to get onto that windowsill. So it really becomes this like the physicality of it, to see it reenacted was really interesting. And the actors just worked improvisationally. So they kind of did a method style acting, and then I would jump in as the director if they got stuck. Like at one moment, the woman playing Anna was just like, "Oh, I have a fear of heights. Why would I even go near the window?" And so I, as the director, I'm like, "Okay, but you've been drinking heavily, so maybe, you know, that might have like loosened your inhibitions somewhat." And then the audience also gets to interject and bring in their 2 cents and ask questions. And so I'm kind of the director and fact checker, and through kind of, we keep performing it over and over until we kind of reach the point of exhaustion of like, can the actors get to that point where she might have gone out the window, as kind of the question. So that's the piece. Like was it was around an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, the performance, somewhere in there. Yeah, and then the video is 20 minutes long, kind of edited down to 20 minutes. So.
And this is the only place you've done the performance, or
I did the performance twice. The first time was kind of just this sketch where there was this place called Agape Enterprise, which was like near Memento Art in Brooklyn and like Bushwick. I think it's no longer around anymore. But I had a friend who was doing an exhibition there and had commissioned artists to do performances. And I didn't really even know what to do, but I'm like, okay, I'll do something. And I didn't know what to do, but I had been sitting on all of this research that I had been doing about the night of her death. And like, I'd gone so far as like contacting the police officer who had responded to the scene of the crime. Like I had the weather report. So I was like sitting on like this mountain of information, and I'm like, okay, like let me see this reenacted. And so I did kind of a small performance with that, and I thought and the audience was there, and it was kind of this sketch, and I was like, this is actually really interesting. And so then I redid the performance with the concept to make a video piece of it, but still wanting to keep those elements of the audience in there and to kind of show the set and the apparatus of the film, making the film itself. So yeah.
And what made you get into this story? I mean, it's a...
Yeah, I mean, I think that like a lot of my work is interested in just like histories where women have been really overlooked or overshadowed. And I mean, this project began in 2011, which is when I first started reading. I mean, I didn't intend to make a project about Ana Mendieta at all. I was just reading this book, and then that's when the New Yorker article came out, and I was like, oh my God, he's Carl Andre saying something totally different. And I guess I have a bit of a like detective sort of mind that I wanted to investigate it further. But it also is very fitting of also like thinking about power structures. I mean, the piece is about Ana Mendieta and Carl Andre, but it's also about who has power in, in the art world, in the world at large, and the representations of, these two kind of power structures and the battle of that. So,
yeah. Also, it seems like, your work also deals a lot about how these histories and art and, the archive are also places that are not neutral. And and it's also like, you obviously you don't want to rewrite anything, but you want to leave the story like open-ended. And do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm not like with the piece, I'm not trying to say, oh, Carl Andre definitely killed her or he definitely did it. Like, I'm not trying to say either way. I'm just trying to present it forward and to think about, well, let's revisit this. Like, let's revisit this. And what does it mean to revisit this now versus back then when, at the trial, things about like, oh, she's a fiery Latina comes up, and it's just like, holy shit, like would that be, just these things, and like, oh, she had a death wish, she was making work with blood, and just like she was the one who was almost on trial, whereas he wasn't, and just so it's just like even within the court system at in the mid 80s or like late 80s by the time the trial was, it's still just like this like old boys club sort of. And so what does it mean to kind of revisit that now? Would things have maybe gone a bit differently? Also, would people have maybe, there's a lot of like people within the New York art world, especially, who are like, I don't want to say anything bad about Carl Andre because I'd love to have a show at Paula Cooper. And so just thinking about, I think that a lot of artists can relate to, all of the, gossip and also like trying to get ahead and everything like that, and who ultimately has power within this like world that we try to think is so beyond that in a sense. So
right. And it's the same approach as the story with Mary Shelley and all of these stories that who has the right to tell the story, and why, and under which circumstances also. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm interested in whose voice we always heard, and then whose voices have been eradicated and can be brought forward. So
and for this work you also had this
So I've shown it in a few different forms. So this is the show at Pioneer Works where I had first done the performance. And so I've shown this. A lot of times my work can kind of be shown in different like almost modules or something. It's like you could just show the film, but you could also show the whole thing. And in this circumstance, I was lucky enough to be able to put together I got to like bring remnants of the set and incorporate that, as well as I had a series of letterpresses that were transcribed from audience responses that are sitting in the vitrine to the left, and then the video. So it becomes like a little bit more interactive with the space. I've also just screened the film as well. I mean, I would love to redo the performance at some point. I think it'd be interesting to redo it now, especially as Ana Mendieta's like become a lot more, like when I started doing this project, she was I mean, she was definitely known, but I think she's had a real resurgence in the last so many years. And I think like less so, or wasn't quite as well known when I first started this project. So,
And where do you think that it would make sense? Like,
to do a performance?
yeah, like where in the world?
Oh, I mean, I do think doing it in New York's always great because it's such a New York story in a way. But I mean, what was interesting actually about doing the performance at Pioneer Works, where it was open to the public, and there were people who didn't know Carl Andre or Anna Mendieta, like they didn't know anything about art who were there. And they certainly had a lot of opinions, which which was interesting because it wasn't just playing to an art going crowd, and I think that it is a story that anybody can relate to, especially if anybody's been in a volatile relationship. So, I think it's an interesting performance. And also with each time, like even the two performances I did, like what the audience are bringing and how the performance goes, it'll change, it'll evolve each time too. It's not a set script. So, yeah.
And these are
yes. Yeah. So these are the other kind of second half of the project. The project I was doing about Anna Mendieta, which is called Finding Anna. And in 2012, based off of information, which has shifted since, but at the time, the Guggenheim and a lot of other sources that I found were stating that all of the Rupestrian sculptures, these sculptures that Anna Mendieta had created in Cuba, had disappeared, basically been eroded due to weather. And so I traveled to Cuba to try to find the site where she created this work, thinking that I wasn't going to find any sculptures, but just that I wanted to find the location. And when I got there, I was surprised to find, and also finding where the location was a bit of a needle in the haystack, where it was because I met a guy from the area who was a young boy and had met Anna Mendieta when she was doing the sculptures, and he ended up knowing exactly where they were and led me with a machete through the jungle to where the sculptures were. I wouldn't have found them otherwise. There's no way. I had all these site images and was kind of walking around not knowing what I was looking for. But in any case, I came across the sculptures, and I think that this kind of goes still with that idea of like who's in the position of authority to report something. I mean, it's only actually this last spring the Guggenheim has updated their website under the Rupestrian sculptures to state that some of them were destroyed, not all of them. So it's just interesting of like these sources that we would think are
trust.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not necessarily so. And I think that like with this project, it was kind of the first project that I really did that it was a bit of a holy grail, but also it allowed me to realize that so much of my work relies on travel or having to physically go to the site and have an experience so that I know what that experience is. Like I can research it to death, but I have to go. And I think that with this project, it kind of solidified that for me. Like had I not gone, I wouldn't have found it. So,
So how was the journey? Like you searched or you did your research and you looked into a map, or and then you went there. And
yeah, I had read a lot about I located a bit, like it's in Haruko Park. I'd located sort of whereabouts it was. I'd reached out to there were a number of artists who had gone, like Cuban American artists who had gone at around the same time as Anna Mendieta was making this work. And I'd reached out to one of them to see, because I know that he had known at one point where it was. And he had emailed me back and said, I know she was staying at this hotel, there, and like it was within walking distance of there. And he's like, maybe if you ask someone at the hotel. I mean, trying to find anything on Cuba online, and otherwise it's just in tourist books and you can't find anything at all. So when I got there, the hotel I could see the remnants of the building, but it was defunct. And there was like one cafe that has like a bit of a Moroccan theme for whatever reason in the middle of the park. And I left the person who drove me from Havana there to have lunch. And all of a sudden, I'm looking around with all these site photographs to see if I can match the scenery with it. And it all just looks like jungle and caves. And I mean, it was a bit ridiculous to look back on, but then all of a sudden the driver was like driving down the road and he's like, and I'm like, oh, great. He's done his lunch. He just wants to go back to Havana. Is like either going to abandon me or like make me go back. And the limited Spanish that I had at the time, I understood that there's a guy on a motorcycle coming and he drove past and we followed him. And then that was the man who, as a young boy, had met Mendieta and knew exactly what I was looking for. So whatever the conversation at the cafe had happened between this guy as he came in, and I mean, I owe it to them to really kind of bring me to the caves. So
That's an awesome story.
yeah, it was remarkable because I just expected to find the caves as well. Like I was hoping to, thinking that there'd be nothing there and to document basically the nothingness, and then to realize, oh my God, there's actually sculptures there. It was a really magical. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever have a find like that as good again. So,
could you ever make a performance like the work that you did for Ana Mendieta?
Yeah. I mean, I made like a small video which I never really showed about this. I mean, I do feel that this project, I've kind of put it to bed, but I think I've kind of done what I can with it, but I think it's like something that I will hold really dear to me, that like speaks a lot to just me and the experience and like being able to find something. And I feel like it really kind of set up the trajectory of these like investigations that I make, and trying to, you know, think about like the broader sense of things, of it's not just necessarily like I like looking at a biography of people. I like hearing gossip. I love it. It's exciting, but also thinking about, well, what else what can speak to like the larger aspects of the world through that. So
yeah, and it's also it seems like your work, it's almost like a relationship, you know, like you spend time and, you know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And I feel like sometimes by the time it gets like to the gallery, it's just like, it's like a birthing process or something, that sometimes I'll look at my work and I'm like, did I make that? Like there's like this weird separation from it. And because I think within the work, I'm holding on to like the photographs are like, I mean, maybe less so in the film because there's more dialogue that's coming out through it, but I'm holding on to like a memory of that experience. And which I don't know, it's nice to keep a little something for yourself, I guess, too. So
I want to show a little bit of the film.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me
You know what it's like to come from a foreign country, be dumped out, put over here, right? And to have to struggle as a woman for your art. You know what that's like.
We all struggle as artists.
No, but you struggle less. You struggle less. It's a little boys club. Everything is a little, all the dicks look out for each other. The art world that Carl Andre is a part of is definitely maintained and protected.
Your success has all because of me. You'd still be wallowing in the fucking mud, up to your neck in chicken blood, if it wasn't for my help.
Anna had an intense phobia of heights. Get up and open the window for
I
me.
don't want it open. I'm sleeping.
Come on. You think I need you, but I don't. You understand that? You understand that I don't need you for anything in my life? What, reality?
No.
Okay, Carl. I'm gonna open the door, okay?
So whether he threw her out physically or drove her out psychologically, I think those are the two options, or somewhere in between, but she definitely didn't fall out.
So she had confronted him before about the infidelities. Oh, because you're the great Carla.
Yes, because I'm a great Carla.
The great
And
Carla.
you're Ana Mendieta.
You're so fantastic.
Yes.
And you're too much of a man to just have.
I think I can stop there.
Yeah. So that's a bit of a mashup from different scenes, kind of different points in the film, but it gives you a sense of kind of, you know, the audience interjecting. There's points where they'll kind of break character and look to me for advice as the actors seeking advice from their director. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting piece, and it's sometimes like, it's still like uncomfortable to watch too. Like there's like moments that it's really hard to watch.
I mean, because I know that you are an educator and you're a professor. have you shown this to your students, and what's
I don't know if I've ever actually
reaction?
shown my students. I try never to show my students too much of my work. I mean, I know that they'll like Google me and stuff like that, but every now and then, usually maybe at the end of the semester, I might show them some work. I mean, most of my students are like Carl Andre, their team Ana Mendieta. So it's nice to see the younger generation, kind of in their mind, it's like no dispute. But then it's also interesting too, because like sometimes I'll do a lecture, for, whatever school or something, and an artist talk. And there's still like a lot of people who don't know who Ana Mendieta is, but they know who Carl Andre is. So just like thinking about also just like how the canon has like been reinforced through their through art history, and then also like how as educators we need to challenge that as well, and like, but also like I have to think too sometimes of like, oh, am I like, who do I put forward? Who do I show them in class? And to try to make sure that I'm showing them a diverse body of, diverse artists, and showing them, interesting work that's not just kind of reiterating what I was taught. So
But also being responsible about, again, what you're saying, like who writes the history and who's allowed to become really interested.
Yeah. I mean, I think just like the projects that I make are really different from one another. But I think that those are the through lines that kind of exist and continue to run, is just like looking at history, looking at, who is in the position of authority, whose histories have we heard and that we just take for fact. And what does it mean to kind of revisit something and like think about it through a different perspective or different lens. So
those are the guiding principles of
and then like a lot of, and then you just kind of have to like allow the work to happen. Like I try not to force anything, and a lot of it, is luck and is chance and is like whatever the circumstances are on, if I'm traveling somewhere and what happens on that trip. Like I can only plan so much, and I like the fact that like the experience has to also kind of like seep in as well. So,
and that it also takes time, and a work is also an artwork is allowed also to be transformed or not. Like for me, it's this performance of the lecture could have like so many hours added on to it.
I know. I could keep, making like a whole encyclopedia, if you will.
Right. Can I show it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's only 2 minutes, but I just wanted to.
And I would just say that, like,
let me put it on mute so you can talk. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, just to keep in mind that when I'm doing it, I'm actually physically like PowerPointing my way through it. So the transitions are all really fast sometimes, and that's me. So anyhow, go ahead and play.
And that's the beauty of the performance, because it's only one, it's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
I love this work so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love it.
Are like internet or archival material.
Yeah, it's mainly just images I've grabbed from the internet. It was nice to work with like a PowerPoint's a free medium, so it was really nice to make something that that I could make for free, and that also it can exist in different forms. So
right, yeah. I want to open up to the public. If you have any questions.
Maybe I answered everyone's questions.
Have you had anyone like kind of confront you about this work? Like how?
No, not really. Oh, Carl Andre makes another appearance. I think that if anything, I felt really, doing the PowerPoint performance especially it was like a little scary for me, to put myself in the forefront as well of performing this. And, and it's a really vulnerable position to be in, especially like when I did it at the Irish Museum of Modern Art, there was like a crowd of like 300-400 people at the event. And that was rather intimidating, but I felt like after it's a bit of a rush, and like after, you know, you can feel like a lot of support as well. That I, yeah, that I felt like people are like, oh, you got to like express things that I've been feeling, and I feel like that's kind of the nice thing that happens.
No, that's
I'm just trying to read that.
Jaime.
Oh yeah, I would
Wait,
love. Yeah,
I'm
I like
kind of
this.
blind. Wait, can you read
It's
this?
about this art history. Oh, performance. Of Carolee Schneeman had done like a art history performance. I don't even know this, so I'd be very. I mean, there goes my research, but I would like love to learn more about that. Then, um,
Yeah,
but
the
yeah,
work can keep transforming itself, and
yeah,
you know, adding
exactly.
on to histories, and I think this is why your work is so significant and important also,
Thank you.
because it's tracing also a lot of these things.
Yeah, yeah, and it's. I mean, it's interesting when I come across information. I'm like, oh my god, I feel sometimes like I can't believe that I didn't know this. You know. Oh, thanks, thanks, Amy. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, but I mean, even yeah, like the Carl Andre Onomendieta. Like, I mean, I was always taught like, oh, I was always under the assumption she had killed herself until I like realized, oh, there's a lot more to it than this, and I think it's also interesting that like it's always prefaced that, you know. I mean, I guess I struggled a little bit with that piece of like, am I just kind of doing the thing again of like reaffirming, like, oh, focusing too much on her death as opposed to the work that she made. And so that's why I also like wanted to do another project about her too, to not just like focus on this one aspect because
Yeah.
she's such an amazing artist and all these other and so groundbreaking. Um, so yeah, so I like had to kind of grapple with that a little bit, but I do think that, you know, it's still doing the performance and focusing on that aspect was just almost like it came out of a blind spot that I didn't really have and that I learned about more and wanted
Yeah.
to then kind of educate or share too. So
Yeah, and also like again, you're not trying to, you know, set anything set in stone. You know, this is not the history.
yeah,
Also, you're trying to open up like a lot of, and you know, the million possibilities for
yeah,
something to be read.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, that's I'm again saying your
yeah,
second project actually
yeah, uncovers the work.
uncovers the
Yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it becomes like this reinforcing evidence of, you know, just like, oh, those, at least in 2012 when I was there, you know, that's how they existed in this form. And yeah, and I mean, some things have taken a little while to catch up to. Some things have been disputed that it's always said that it was in existence, but at least the sources that I had read, you know, some pretty heavy-handed ones like the Guggenheim, you know, glad they got their facts straight finally. So
You did them a favor. Yeah. Do we have more questions from the audience? I just want to make sure that everyone, yeah. Or do you want to share anything else about?
well, my goodness, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think this was like a real pleasure to be able to have the opportunity to like think about my practice, and I think also think about like not. I guess I get so focused on like the current project or the project that's just like kind of um, been made, and it's been a nice opportunity to kind of like, oh, like let me look back at like the last, you know, 10 years of my practice and to see. You know, kind of where I started to where I am now, and what are the things that are, you know, how did things shift, and what are things that are kind of remaining the same, and to again kind of find, like I said, the through lines of,
Yeah.
you know, oh, this is what my interest is. It kind of, yeah, this is like a pleasure to be able to, you know, kind of
No, our pleasure.
consider it. Yeah, and just like a great.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you kind of forget to kind of look at the whole, and you just focus on like the thing you're in the
Right.
middle of. So
And sometimes we always look, when we do that exercise of looking back,
Yeah.
we kind of realize what are the things that keep us coming back to all these things, all these other artists, the subjects. For example, I have you know, an obsession with documents, historical documents, and archival material, and this is why I'm really interested also in your work, but also surveillance. I'm like really,
Yeah.
and I don't know why, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's like therapy or something
well,
to go through.
I don't know if it's therapy, but like this looks like a therapy
Yeah.
session actually. What we're doing. This is I may ask you a question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's really too early to fully know where like I always have kind of some ideas and then, but the project that I'm planning to work on next, I mean, COVID's really hard for me because my work relies so much on travel, and I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I need to try to figure out a project I can do locally, but also the project that I'm trying to plan to do is I'm planning to go to the Atacama Desert in Chile for a few weeks to work on a project about looking at the mining history historically and contemporarily, relating this to um, two scientists who were working in Germany at the turn of the century, and then like thinking about Silicon Valley now, and yeah, so those are kind of like the sprinkle of ideas. It's a bit complicated to get into, but that's kind of where the research is right now. Again, kind of bringing in like this one female scientist, kind of bringing her voice more to the forefront. But also I think about climate change, which is like something that's become more and more increasingly of interest to me to make work about, but wanting to bring in a biographical kind of aspect or something that can kind of have a hook with that. So that's my plan. The residency I was going to do has been postponed from March until September now. So I'm hoping that I'll get there. But in the meantime, I might, yeah, we'll see. But a lot of my projects, like they take like 2 years, you know, I do a ton of research and then travel to make it. Like the making of it sometimes, or the shooting can sometimes be shorter, but it's like everything that's going into prep that, and then the post-production. So we'll see. Or else I'm going to have to make something about Los Angeles, I guess. I'm sure there's interesting stories to be had here. So
For sure, yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's been the longest summer ever, or
yeah,
I don't know,
the year without a summer for us. So
yeah. I don't know how to call it anymore because I'm not. I mean, I'm from an island, a tropical island, and like for me to not be able to like spend time out or whatever, it's been really tough.
Yeah. I see. There's another.
How do residencies facilitate your research projects, etc.?
Residencies have been, I would say, vital in a sense to my work. I find residencies to be, generally speaking, pretty awesome for me because it gives me a real focus. Like I can focus and like kind of really use my time there. Generally speaking, I would say that I try to find a residency like that's going to be in tune with like something that I'm already researching, or something that's going to kind of, like the residency at Becque. I had this idea sort of about doing something about Mary Shelley, which came out of the project, like from the Blue Project, where when I traveled to Geneva to take photographs of the archival material there, and I noticed all these references to Frankenstein. And so it kind of like piqued the interest to the next project. And then, I had the opportunity. I could make a convincing case to go on that residency because I had a really amazing project to make that was very like site specific. And within that residency too, like the actors, if you will, in my piece, they're the residents of Becque, thinking about Mary Shelley and her circle, which is like this, like, spending their summer on Lake Geneva. What is it like to be in a confined space with very creative people, and what does that bring is so similar to what the residency experience is. And so if I have like a topic like the Atacama, like I want to do this thing in the Atacama Desert, so I was able to find a residency that could help facilitate that. And yeah, so I mean, I wonder if I'm gonna have to slow down with doing residencies a little bit. I've done a lot of them, and it can be hard. I mean, it can be emotionally hard as well, and you're away, but I think it's been really kind of crucial to my making, and I'm really grateful that I get to have that experience. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elise, I think we're up for now.
Okay.
Instagram will work us up, and I just don't want to leave you hanging with something
No
that you want to
problem.
say. But
No,
thank you so much. Sorry.
yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. It was great. And
Yeah.
thanks to the whole team. So
You're welcome.
great.
And thank you so much for your work. It's amazing. I
Thank
really
you. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Okay.
And thank you
Bye.
all for joining.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.